Baku, this year's Eurovision capital, has hosted recently a political event which did not get in the way Eurovision did the same attention from the media and the public. The second Euronest meeting, apparently during the forum to promote political and economic integration between the EU and Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Moldova and Ukraine, some progress has been made in fields such as energy, trade and human rights. Still, in a time when the relationship between Brussels and Kiev, the bigger Eastern partner, is colder than ever because of the imprisoned former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, the EU's plan to get the 6 countries closer to the West seems to be difficult than ever. Bulgarian Social Democrat MEP Kристиан Вигенин, co-president of the Assembly, shared with us today his views on how the Euronest really work. Mr. Vigenin, thank you very much for joining us. It seems to be not an easy task to get together the representative of the 6 EU Eastern neighbors. However, in Baku, you adopted some resolutions. Could we get into details?
Yeah, I think that it's true on one hand that it's not easy, but the challenge is very motivating for all of us. And I think in only 1 year since the creation of the Euronest Assembly, we were able to achieve certain results. The meeting in Baku was very successful, not only because we adopted these resolutions, but because of the spirit of cooperation that has been created and prevailed during this meeting. We finalized the work of the 4 standing committees of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. They're based on the 4 platforms of the Eastern Partnership. I would especially mention on first place the resolution of the Political Affairs Committee, which dealt with the challenges for democracy in the Eastern neighborhood and including the freedom of media in the region. I think these are 2 very delicate and important topics
and
for
which
the region.
Countries are the most problems? With this respect?
What we've tried to do this time, since this is a joint assembly and it concerns the policy not only of the eastern neighbors and the situation there, but also within the European Union, we've decided not to single out specific countries, but to identify the problems, the principles on which the policy should be based, and the fact that the Assembly adopted almost unanimously these resolutions means, from my point of view, that all countries, their parliamentary representatives, take the responsibility to implement all these ideas and principles. We feel that a lot needs to be done. I wouldn't compare the countries, but we see that the process of democratization, of improving the respect of human rights, of guaranteeing the freedom of speech and of media is a process with ups and downs, if I can say so. And my impression is that the efforts that has been made not only correspond to the results, and that's why it's important to really to raise all the time these topics in our relations.
You mean that there has been a lot of effort, but not the results are not at so high?
Well, I would say that this is a long-term process. Sometimes we see improvements, and sometimes we see that these improvements are not sustainable, and new efforts need to be done. If I can be more concrete, first of all, I would like to clarify that Belarus itself is not participating in the Euronest Assembly yet, because we, as European Parliament, do not recognize the Parliament in Belarus as elected in free and fair elections. We hope that something will change this autumn when they have their elections, and we work on this, but still, for the moment, Belarus is not participating. And this is the worst example, of course, of all the 6 countries of the eastern neighborhood. We see...
And the best?
Now it's difficult to say which one is the best, but I can say that we see a lot of efforts for improvement with clear results in Armenia. They just had their parliamentary elections, which is the other issue which has been a matter of discussion in this report, because this year there are a number of elections in the Eastern Partnership, and this is a key issue for every country. So elections in Armenia were much better than before, and they kept their promise to improve the legal framework, the way elections are organized, the access to media of opposition and so on. Of course, nobody's perfect, but there was a real improvement. Then we look closely at Georgia. Georgia has elections this year. There were a certain problematic issue, I must say, which, always when a country...
Could you name it?
More specifically, it was the case of Mr. Ivanishvili, who decided to enter politics in Georgia, and certain problems for him personally, for his new party, have been created by the authorities. Finally, also on the basis of the pressure we exerted on different levels, it seems that this issue is solved, and Mr. Ivanishvili and his party will be able to participate in the elections on an equal basis. But still, reports that we receive show that there is certain disbalance in the presence of opposition in media. They have much lower access than the ruling party, and this is an issue that still has to be taken into account. And if we come to Ukraine, I know that this is a topic that maybe we're going to discuss in more details later, but in principle, also there, it seems that the versions, the explanations of the ruling party and the opposition differ a lot, including on the issue of media and the independence of media. But I must say that the situation with media in Ukraine is more stable, in the sense that there is already quite a tradition in pluralism of media, and despite the fact that sometimes we receive reports that government is influencing certain media, there is a possibility of, there is diversity of media sources, of information. So from that point of view, I'm less worried about Ukraine, even now in the run-up to the elections. And as regards Azerbaijan, our host country, I must say that a lot has to be done there as well, with regard to respect of human rights, political freedoms, and also freedom of media. The good part of this is that the authorities there, in all our contacts and discussions, they realize, they admit that there are problems and they work on them. But of course, we would like to see more efforts and more results. Still, I said it also during the Baku meeting, in the press conference we had at the end, that as long as there is a dialogue, discussion, and our partners listen to our concerns and try to respond to them, I'm not worried. The problem would be once they, if they go into defensive and start denying the problems. They don't do it, and I'm hopeful that this will bring the results there as well.
In this picture, Moldova seems to be the most quiet place within the Eastern European neighborhood.
Yeah, I almost missed sometimes the news from Moldova, and I always say that sometimes when there are no problems in the country, we tend to forget that still the people there have their problems, and we should keep an eye on Moldova as well. Since Moldova has no elections this year, somehow the focus has shifted to the other countries. But in principle, I must say that the general environment in Moldova is maybe the best for the moment, in the sense that there is certain tradition in democratic elections, in a change, alternation of parties in power, in opposition.
With a lot of effort.
Yeah, and then they solved the big issue that was poisoning the political life for years, the election of a president. So from that point of view, Moldova has its problem with the so-called frozen conflict conflict in Transnistria, but as regards the Moldova itself, I'm more optimistic, and the problem there is rather the economic development, not the democracy issue.
You already mentioned Transnistria. Within the eastern neighborhood, we have other frozen conflicts from Nagorno-Karabakh to Ossetia and Abkhazia. Can Euronest help to resolve this conflict? And
yes, in principle, Euronest is not an assembly or a body where we can take decision on how to solve this conflict. There are recognized formats which deal with these conflicts. But our added value is the environment that we create, the environment of cooperation. This is a unique format of our assembly where actually our partners from the eastern neighborhood parliaments participate on equal basis with European parliamentarians, and they're forced because of this format to cooperate together. I mean, on the eastern side of our assembly, and I see that only in 1 year, for example, I saw very different climate in the relations between the parliamentarians from Azerbaijan and Armenia. Our first meeting in Strasbourg in September could not achieve any result just because of contradictions between the two delegations. But then afterwards, everybody realized that this is not the way to continue the work in our assembly. We've decided first that the first committee meeting outside European Parliament will be in Armenia, and Azerbaijani parliamentarians took part in this meeting, and they had all the possibilities to participate and to contribute to the work. Then the full Armenian delegation took part in the meeting in Baku, which was also a unique situation, and despite some contradictions again that appeared and were provoked, honestly speaking, not within the assembly but from the message of the President Aliyev to our assembly, despite that the two delegations made it possible to continue our work within the assembly, and they agreed on a number of issues. They supported the resolutions, and this new spirit, I think, the fact that they know each other, they can anytime call each other if there is a problem, makes me hopeful that this is the way, step by step, to create this confidence that could lead to a negotiated solution, because we always make it very clear there is no other solution than negotiated solution. So this is particularly important. The Nagorno-Karabakh case, an issue. There we can have the strongest impact because it's between two countries that are part of the eastern neighborhood. The case with Moldova and Georgia is a bit different. So from that point of view, our added value there is lower, but still we can think about those problems. And by the way, the report that now is being prepared by the Political Affairs Committee for the next meeting, which will take place first half of next year in Brussels, is particularly related to the security challenges in the region, which would include
is one of them.
Which would include also the so-called frozen conflicts. This is a hot issue, but I think we are mature enough now to enter into this debate as well.
Speaking about the solutions, is any solution acceptable? For instance, it seems that the Western countries, the European Union, many of the countries are supporting a solution of federalization with respect to Moldova and Transnistria. Is this kind of solution acceptable?
Well, I wouldn't take a stand what is the best solution for this conflict, but what is important is that this solution is accepted on the spot in Moldova and respectively in Transnistria.
Transnistria is a part of Moldova. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, but I mean the authorities which de facto are responsible for the life in Transnistria and the people there should be in favor of this kind of solution. I personally feel that this could be a solution because we cannot prolong forever this case. And if this is the step to finally unify again the country, why not? But as a co-president of Euronest, I wouldn't elaborate on this issue unless we see a clear stand also on the side of our partners in Moldova that they accept this and they are ready to work in that direction.
Focusing on Ukraine now, how could you help toward a solution on Tymoshenko case? With the Ukrainian first Deputy Prosecutor General, Renat Kuzmin, saying to the German newspaper Die Zeit that Tymoshenko had the fairest trial in the world.
Well, I would say that we cannot compare trials. I mean, which trial is the fairest? I would agree that the trial and the sentence to high extent correspond to the existing legislation in Ukraine. The problem is that this is a legislation that first of all is outdated and secondly was selectively used against one of the political leaders in Ukraine. European Parliament has made a lot of efforts, including and maybe mainly the group of the Socialists and Democrats here. We try to support the dialogue, the contacts with the Party of the Regions and Prime Minister and the respective responsible people.
And you'll have the delegation at the trial.
Yes, then it was decided and agreed that two high-level politicians, former President of European Parliament Pat Cox and Kwasniewski, the former President of Poland, will observe the trial against Tymoshenko from now on. We'll have a full access to all the documents and all materials in this trial. And we hope that this way, this could help to find a solution which let's say, will less damaging for all the sides in this trial and in this trial, which became a real political problem within Ukraine and for Ukraine in its relations with the European Union. It's very difficult, to judge. I personally have always said that we have to make difference between political prisoner and politician in prison.
What is the difference?
The difference is that the fight against corruption, organized crime, against misuse of power is something important in all neighbors in the European Union, not only on these but also on the south. And we ask for this and we encourage all actions that would end impunity and misuse of high-level politicians being in power when they are in power.
This might be a case in Ukraine.
That's what I'm saying, that this effort of the current authorities to end the impunity in Ukraine, which was there for many years, not just in the last mandate, has to be welcomed. On the other side, we think that there are evidences that this specific case with Tymoshenko goes beyond this wish to end impunity. And that is why we are very sensitive what would be the outcome of all this and what are the evidences. And could we there is a question, could we recognize elections which have to take place this autumn if they're organized in the best possible way, but one or few of the leaders of the opposition are not able to participate in these elections because they are in prison for charges that are at least questionable. That is why I feel that this mission of the European Parliament, without having too high expectation for it, will create an environment where step by step this issue can be solved. On the other hand, I would like to warn in advance that because I have discussions with some of the colleagues here, especially EPP, which are the political partners of the party of Yulia Tymoshenko, that we should not already at this stage prejudge the outcome of the elections and put as a kind of
compromised election.
To put as a condition which is not negotiable the participation of Tymoshenko in these elections, because despite the fact that she is a prominent figure, leader of one of the opposition parties, still this is one politician, and if the rest looks and is organized in the best way, this doesn't mean that we should definitely already now say that we are not going to recognize the elections. And secondly, the discussion is also in EPP what should be the approach of Europe if we say that elections are not free and fair because she is not participating, but still opposition wins the elections. So you see, we have to be careful not to apply double standards to the government, to the electoral process, and let's try not to prejudge the process now, because I hope, I'm still optimistic that this situation, which was underestimated a lot by the authorities in Ukraine at the very beginning of the situation, that this situation still has a positive solution. Mm-hmm. Because Ukraine, I would like to underline, is Ukraine is a European country. It belongs to Europe. It has to remain in the EU orbit, let's say, or framework, whatever we call it. We need to sign the association agreement as soon as possible, and all actions on our side as well, which could be regarded as kind of pushing Ukraine or putting barriers, pressing, or let's say even talk about sanctions on leaders, things like that, comparing Belarus to Ukraine, which is not comparable in my opinion. This might finally move or push Ukraine back in a direction which is bad for the Ukrainian people and bad for the European Union as well. Mm-hmm. So we have to be careful, and still all the efforts that can be done should be done in order to keep Ukraine on the European path.
Close to the European Union. Mr. Vigenin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.